What happened that night changed everything.
The four were stabbed with a knife, and these murders have shaken us to our very core.
Because of him, four beautiful, compassionate people were taken from this world.
It was overwhelming, would be an understatement.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger.
Four young people, one house, one night that ended their lives, and nearly a year later, the story still isn't over. Bryan Kohberger stood in a courtroom and admitted to killing them.
How do you plead guilty or not guilty? Guilty.
He got 4 life sentences with no chance of parole. Case closed, or so everyone thought. But behind the scenes, something else has been unraveling. A leak investigation that could expose who was talking to the press before the trial ever started, and a bitter fallout between Kohberger's own defense team and the expert who was supposed to help him. Moscow, Idaho. Population around 25,000. A small university town where the biggest headline most weeks is a football score. It hadn't seen a homicide in roughly 5 years. That changed in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were found stabbed to death inside an off-campus rental home. 2 other roommates survived. One of them told police she saw a masked man with bushy eyebrows inside the house that night. What followed was a 7-week manhunt, a break in genetic genealogy technology, an arrest 3 states away, and, 3 years later, a courtroom reversal that is still unfolding as this video is being made. This is the story of the Idaho student murders, the facts, the investigation, and the case of Bryan Kohberger. Before this is a true crime story, it's a story about 4 young people. Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. Kaylee and Madison were roommates and best friends since childhood. Xana lived in the same house with her boyfriend Ethan, visiting that night. All 4 were University of Idaho students. The house sat at 1122 King Road, a rental just off campus, shared by 6 students. 2 others, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funka, were home that night and survived. According to court documents and police timelines, the 4 victims returned home in the early hours after separate outings: a bar downtown, a food truck. Sometime around 4 a.m., an intruder entered the home. Surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen later told investigators she woke, heard noises, and saw an unfamiliar man wearing a mask walk past her, then leave through a back door. She described him as having bushy eyebrows. She did not immediately call 911. At around noon that day, one of the surviving roommates called 911, saying a friend appeared to be unconscious. Police arrived and discovered all 4 victims dead. Investigators determined each had been stabbed with a large fixed-blade knife. There were no signs of sexual assault, and the surviving roommates were not harmed. Moscow police, more accustomed to noise complaints and minor theft, were suddenly running the largest homicide investigation in the town's history. With no weapon recovered, no suspect named, and a community in shock. For weeks, the case produced more questions than answers. Police initially urged the public not to panic, even as they offered no arrests and few details. Tips poured in. A white sedan seen near the home became a major focus. So did unconfirmed rumors targeting people who had no connection to the crime at all. A reminder of how quickly online speculation can spiral in a case like this. The break came from something left behind at the scene: a leather knife sheath found near one of the victims. Investigators recovered what they described as touch DNA on the snap of that sheath. When run through a public genetic genealogy database, that DNA sample was traced, not directly to a name, but to a family tree. Investigators built out that tree and, combined with other evidence, arrived at a name: Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old Ph.D. student in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman. just about 10 miles from the crime scene. According to court documents, cell phone data placed a phone associated with Kohberger near the King Road house at least a dozen times in the months before the murders, almost always late at night or early in the morning. Records also allegedly showed his phone near the area again in the hours after the killings. Investigators also obtained surveillance footage of a white Hyundai Elantra, matching a car registered to Kohberger, seen repeatedly near the house in the weeks before the attack. To confirm the DNA match, investigators say they secretly collected a discarded item from Kohberger's family home in Pennsylvania, where he had traveled for the holidays. The DNA on that item was reported as a statistical match to what was found on the knife sheath. On December 30th, 2022, 7 weeks after the murders, police arrested Bryan Kohberger at his parents' home in Chestnut Hill Township, Pennsylvania.
Kohberger's background surprised many people who followed the case closely. He wasn't a stranger to the subject of crime, he was studying it. He held a master's degree in criminal justice and was, at the time of the murders, a doctoral student in criminology at Washington State University. Some of his academic work reportedly touched on criminal psychology and investigative methods, details that fueled intense public speculation, though prosecutors never publicly confirmed a motive tied to his studies. Latah County prosecutor Bill Thompson later said publicly that investigators found no evidence Kohberger had any history of violence or a prior criminal record before the murders. To this day, no official motive has been confirmed. That absence of a clear why has remained one of the most unsettling parts of this case for investigators, for the public, and above all, for the victims' families.
Kohberger was indicted by a grand jury in Latah County in May 2023 on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He pleaded not guilty, and for nearly 2 years, his defense team fought the case aggressively. His lawyers challenged the grand jury process. They challenged the reliability of the genetic genealogy technique used to identify him, a method still relatively new to criminal courts. They also raised an alibi defense, claiming Kohberger had been out driving alone around the time of the murders, a claim prosecutors disputed using his own cell phone data. Idaho is a death penalty state, and prosecutors had said clearly they intended to pursue capital punishment. A trial date was eventually set for the summer of 2025, and it was expected to draw national media attention comparable to some of the most closely watched trials in recent American history. Then, just weeks before jury selection was set to begin, everything changed. On July 2nd, 2025, Bryan Kohberger appeared in a Boise courtroom and pleaded guilty to all 5 counts, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. It was a stunning reversal after years of denial. As part of the agreement, prosecutors took the death penalty off the table. In exchange, Kohberger agreed to waive his right to appeal. Judge Stephen Hippler asked him directly, was he pleading guilty because he was, in fact, guilty? Kohberger answered yes, under oath, on the record.
Burglary, 10 years fixed, 0 years indeterminate. I also impose a fine of $50,000. Count 2, first-degree murder of Madison Mogen. I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 3, for first-degree murder of Kaylee Goncalves, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the victim of the family, or to the family of the victim, pardon me. On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 5, for the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim.
The victims' families were divided in their reaction. Some said the plea deal spared them from reliving the worst details of the case across a long, painful trial. Others, including Kaylee Goncalves' family, said publicly they had wanted the case to go to trial. They said they believed fully in the strength of the evidence and would have preferred to see Kohberger face a jury and the possibility of execution. On July 23, 2025, Bryan Kohberger returned to court for sentencing. It was an emotional, day-long hearing. Family members and friends of the victims gave statements directly to him. One victim's sister called him a sociopath and a psychopath. A surviving roommate spoke publicly for the first time about the trauma of that night. Kohberger did not address the court. He said nothing. Judge Hippler sentenced Kohberger to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each victim, plus an additional 10 years for the burglary charge and financial penalties totaling roughly $290,000 to the victims' families. The judge acknowledged something the entire country had been asking for nearly 3 years, that Kohberger's motive might never be known.
For the families, the case appeared closed. Kohberger was transferred to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution to begin serving his sentence. And this is where the story takes a turn that surprised almost everyone. Just over a year after his sentencing, in late July 2026, Bryan Kohberger filed a handwritten petition from prison.
This morning, a stunning reversal. Bryan Kohberger wants to withdraw his plea deal and go to trial for the 2022 murders of 4 University of Idaho students. In new handwritten court documents filed Monday, Kohberger claims his lawyer was ineffective, telling him death row was imminent, and he was advised to lie to escape the death penalty. In a statement to the New York Times, Kohberger says the plea was based on false promises and blatant disinformation. The plea deal struck last year, just weeks before a trial was set to begin.
In a statement provided to the New York Times through his family, Kohberger said the case against him amounted to a rushed and incomplete picture of events and argued that only a full trial could bring real closure. Legal experts, however, are skeptical of his chances. Kohberger confirmed under oath, more than once, that his plea was voluntary, first in a signed legal document, then again directly to the judge. Courts generally give enormous weight to sworn, on-the-record statements like that. And to prove ineffective counsel, Kohberger would need to show his attorney's conduct fell so far below professional standards that they essentially failed to function as his lawyers at all, a very high legal bar. The Goncalves family responded with a statement of their own, saying they welcome a trial if it happens, and that they remain confident the evidence would still lead to a conviction, and potentially the death penalty he avoided the first time. As of this recording, the petition is pending before the Idaho courts. What happens next is still unwritten. Whatever the courts ultimately decide about the plea, one thing hasn't changed. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were 4 students with futures ahead of them, taken in a matter of minutes on a November night in 2022. Their families continue to wait, not for a verdict this time, but for something closer to real answers and real peace.